Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one to one with me, and I'm one to one with my friend Austin Camacho. Austin is a publisher, he's a novelist, and he's the founder of a writers' conference, a boutique writers' conference in Columbia, Maryland. I can't remember. We've known each other at least 10 years or so, right?
Or at least.
I think we met at the Hampton Roads Writers Conference in Virginia Beach or Norfolk. I can't remember where. I think it's Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach.
And you and I were both keynote speakers.
Keynote speakers, right.
Exactly. So, and we discovered that we've also got the Army as a common,
Yes.
but we're also DINFOS trained killers.
Yep. Still got
And
the t-shirt.
yeah, do you really? Well, that's more than I do. DINFOS is the Defense Information School. I was in the Army back in the 70s, and I don't know, you were in later, right?
80s.
80s. Okay.
I went in 83.
Okay. But the Defense Information School is where we learn to be military journalists. Okay. So we're old, although I'm older than you are, sir.
We're seasoned.
We are. Oh, good. Have you considered writing? Did you, if I remember correctly from your bio, you actually started playing with fiction while you were in the service?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Was, my spare time was reading, and I caught an idea for a story, and I had no idea what I was doing or how, but I had this idea for an action thriller adventure type story. And so in my spare time, I started putting it together on a manual typewriter. I don't even know if they still exist.
They do. Tom Hanks collects them. So
a very different process, as you will remember.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
I batted out this thing in my third and fourth year after basic training. And it was, I think, maybe 35 or 40,000 words long. And I thought I had written a novel.
That's a novella. That's a
Yes.
novella. And did you have the courage to show it to anybody?
I actually sent it to a lot of places. You remember those days. There were a lot of publishers.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of publishers that didn't require you to have an agent. And I sent it to tons of places. And I learned a great deal from all of those rejections,
right,
which kind of shaped, what I think a novel is and what I think a novel should do.
Were you getting specific feedback?
Well, half and half. About 50% of the people I sent to came back with an actual paragraph. Mm-hmm. This is cool. I like this character. You need to do more of that. Or this is an interesting story, but it doesn't have enough of, this. I'm looking for stories that have more or do this more. I got some really good feedback.
Right. I think that's rare, though. I think a lot of people just got boilerplate rejections.
In my more recent experience, no one wants to take the time to help you to be a better writer.
Yeah. Why is that, do you think?
Well, there are a lot of weird forces in the publishing industry. When I was writing that very early stuff, each major publisher had this thing called a backlist. And they would publish guys that they didn't think would be bestsellers yet, and kind of groom them and build them. And after you had an audience and you had 10 books out and people were buying them, then maybe you'd become a
sort of the farm team kind of thing.
Yes. Today, it seems to me that the major publishers are only looking for blockbusters. If this thing isn't slated for New York Times bestseller, there's no point in us looking at it. We're not interested in grooming and building a stable of authors. Right. And for that reason, the same names inhabit those lists now, month after month after month. And I don't think that's a good thing.
But you're making it sound kind of bleak, and yet it seems to me that there are still plenty of opportunities to get published.
Well, the environment adapts. So what is good is that attitude from the big publishers has spawned. There's a space for small publishers, mid-sized publishers, to come up and do cool things and not get crushed by the big guys. They just need to have some writers that can do the job, and so there are places to be published, and there are good places to be published.
So when did you finally hit pay dirt and actually get published?
Well, one of the things I figured out in the military is that there's this writers community, and I need to be part of it. I started going to conferences, and I went to this big book thing in New York City.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I met some small press people, and I started handing them my manuscript because, I didn't know any better. And one of them said, "Hey, I like this. This is pretty good. Let's do this." And there was no talk of advances or anything like that.
What year would this have been?
Oh, gosh, this is 1990.
Okay.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, man, you were starting way before I did. I didn't start writing until 94.
And I got 2 Hannibal Jones novels published by this very small publisher called Echelon Press. And they started experimenting with this brand new idea called ebooks.
Right.
And the paper books were okay. And I spent a lot of time in those days. You kept a box of books in your trunk, and you went around to bookstores and you said, can I sit here for a couple hours and see if anybody will buy a book? I did a whole lot of that stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then 3 years later, Echelon Press died. And unfortunately, I'd had just enough time to prove to myself that somebody does want to read what you do. And I kept writing, because the writing is what I do. That's the thing.
And I get I get 2 impressions. One is that the stories are or the desire to write is just something innate, that it just, has to get out. That's one thing. The other is, and I've never explored this with you, but I get the impression that you're sort of an extrovert. Am I right?
I never thought so until I had a published book. I think of myself as an introvert who knows how to fake being an extrovert.
Okay.
Because what I learned through personal experience, rather than reading books or anybody telling me, is that if I'm sitting in a bookstore, if I want to sell any of these books, I need to stand up and I need to say good afternoon to everybody that goes by, every person. And everybody that manages to make eye contact with me, I need to quickly tell them, here's why you want one of these.
But that's where it gets scary, because and especially if you're an introvert or if you're shy, that sort of feels like you're a used car salesman. And those kind of people, if you're shy or introverted, you don't want to put people off. So how do you navigate that?
It's a spectrum. Okay. At one end of the spectrum, you've got the person who sits behind a stack of books and reads something. Nobody's going to talk to him.
Yeah.
At the other end of the spectrum, you've got that guy that everybody that comes within 10 feet. Hey, do you read mystery novels?
Right. Right.
That guy's unpopular.
Right.
But if you just say hello, 10 people go by, one of them will stop and say hello back.
Yeah.
That's the person I talk to. Then I can move to, I'm a local author and I'm doing a book signing here.
Right.
If
Right.
they didn't walk away then I start talking about it.
There you
It's
go.
mystery novels. Do you
And
read
if you get
mysteries?
if you get out of 10 people, if 4 talk to you in baseball, that's a slugger.
There
You
you
know,
go.
for you're batting 400. That's pretty good.
Now, let me give my lovely wife, Denise, her fair credit.
Okay.
When I had 2 books, she came up with the idea of you need to have a brochure to hand people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she designed a trifold.
Uh-huh.
And it had
I wonder if I think I have one here. This is
oh yes,
from, I'm
it
not
has
gonna.
it has grown, but
Yeah, because it's all your books
when
and
she did it, it was the information about one book on one panel and another book on another panel and my bio on a third panel
wow.
and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
What I learned is those people who don't want to stop and talk, but don't want to be rude,
Right.
that group, well, here, all information about my books is right there. You can take a
Exactly.
look without me looking over your shoulder and decide if there's anything of interest.
There you go. It's a consolation prize, but it has a
Exactly.
payoff. You know.
And what I learned is a certain percentage of those people, after they wander around the store, will wander back
Yeah.
and say, this looks pretty interesting. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, and you've done this a lot, and I have too. And one of the things, some people will go out of their way not to talk to you.
yes.
There was one woman who was looking at books, and so as she got close to me, I asked her, "Are you just browsing?" And that's the $64,000 question. Her
Yes.
response was, "No, I'm just looking." She didn't want to talk. She didn't want to talk.
Sometimes before I say a word, I get that. I
Yeah.
see a person walking by and say, no, I'm just looking.
Yeah. Well, so okay, let's go back. So the first books, the first writing that you did was Hannibal Jones, right?
Yes.
Okay, well then that gives us an opportunity to take a look at you've written 8 of these,
Yes.
and so let me just get rid of that. Talk about, I mean, I think Subtle Felonies is a great title. It doesn't jump out at you at first like, what does this mean? But there's a message there that has a lot to do with writing as well. So talk about Subtle Felonies.
Well, each book starts with a big idea and then a couple of little ideas attached to it, and then eventually maybe a plot will come around. The big idea in this case was what happens to people who suddenly become wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
The idea came to me because they did a TV feature of the house that a local baseball player was living in, this huge mansion. And I thought, okay, if I suddenly tomorrow got a $20 million contract to do what I do, is this what I would do?
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, what about my friends? How would they react to this? How would I change? How would my family change?
Mm-hmm. And you can see that there's no furniture in this room other than a basketball.
Yes. Subtle, eh?
Uh-huh. And Subtle Felonies. So that's related to basketball as well, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. The title is a direct theft of basketball from a book I read, gosh, when I was in high school about a basketball player. And I remember the quote, basketball is a game of subtle felonies. Mm-hmm. Why? Because if you called every foul, the game would not go on. So you just got to do shit when the ref isn't looking.
Right.
They are subtle felonies when you grab that guy from behind.
Which is what a mystery writer does too.
And then, yes. And then I thought, well, the crime that's involved here is going to involve just that. Somebody who is doing it, getting away with it, and one of my theories about real life crime. I believe that there is no perfect crime, but as long as you're not a suspect, you can get away with it. The second they suspect you, you're done. They can find you. So,
Exactly. I
but
want to read just a snippet from Subtle Felonies,
all right.
which will give people a sense of how you write. And Hannibal turned to find himself facing a very dark black man with yellowed teeth in a wife beater, brown slacks, and work boots. Calling him big would be like saying giraffes are kind of tall.
Yeah.
um it's so nice because that you write the way you talk. I mean, that sounded like you.
Well, I think that that's the way Hannibal thinks. Maybe he thinks like me, but the books that I read that I don't really enjoy, one of those things is people who work too hard at
Right.
similes and metaphors.
Right. Right.
And so I like to use similes and metaphors, but I have to make sure that they are subtle.
Exactly. Because and I'm a manuscript editor, and a lot of times you can tell that they're trying to be fancy or
Yes.
writerly, and just be clear, man. That's all you need to do.
Yes.
Was that something you learned over time? Because would you say your early attempts were pretentious?
Um I think I think my earliest work had a lot of purple prose. But I had some good first readers, and the biggest way to learn, in my opinion, to learn how to write is to read.
All right, good point.
And I read voluminously, and when I hit the right guy, I would say, I want my stuff to sound like this. Raymond Chandler, I want my prose to sound like this. Elmore Leonard, I want my characters to be like this. How do I get to there?
Right, right.
um, Ross MacDonald, who wrote the Archer books, and Nero Wolfe, Rex Stout. I want my stories, I want my plots to be like this. How do I make that happen? And so all of my writing is chasing somebody who I think is in the stratosphere as far as an author is concerned.
And so why choose a PI as your protagonist?
Well, again, Raymond Chandler, my all-time favorite author. And the great thing about kind of pulpy sort of PI stuff is that they managed to say all the things I want to say about society.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is all the really great ones were in the 1940s and the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, they were all white guys. So I have the dual mission here. A character who is not Caucasian, and seizing that PI gestalt and dragging it kicking and screaming into the 20th and now the 21st century. When I did that, halfway through the first Hannibal novel I wrote, I realized how cool this idea was, because, were those guys chivalrous or were they chauvinistic?
Right.
Well, it's a point of view, right?
Yeah.
If you're the one who's being saved, they're being chivalrous. So I set him up with a girlfriend who would always see the other side.
Ah.
She would see yeah.
So he's not a player. He's not a player. He's got a relationship.
Not at all. He's had the same girl throughout the series.
Okay.
And he's also not a drinker.
Ooh, sure, you're getting rid of a lot of the stereotypes
And
there, aren't you?
yes, a lot of it. But the basic character, the basic character is Sam Spade, Lou Archer, all those guys. They have this in common. They have a clear picture of what they think is right and wrong. They're obsessed with getting to the truth, no matter what. And they want to look out for the people who can't look out for themselves.
Okay, I'm gonna start asking some stupid white guy questions. Look, I grew up in the civil rights movement, I grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which was lily white. I mean, the first experience I had with African Americans was my first day in the Army, and my roommate. We were,
Wow.
we went to basic training at Fort Lewis, and the intake was in Minneapolis, and so we spent the night in a hotel in Minneapolis, and my roommate was black. And so I said to him, say, what did you do on the outside before you got into the service? And he said, man, I was pimping. And I go, oh man, I'm in the Army now. And so that was my first experience, right?
Wow.
Right. So, I mean, the military back in the 70s, it's probably still the same, had a terrible race relations problem. And I was stationed overseas in Europe at American Forces Europe, and General Davison, Michael S. Davison, was he felt that there was a race problem, and we all had to go through race relations training, which was fabulous, because one of the things that was a takeaway for me was anybody who says, well, I'm not racist, that's a dead giveaway.
Yes.
And so I learned a lot. And in fact, you knew my roommate, Charlie Johns. Charlie and I were roommates for 2 years at AFN.
Wow.
And so he and I had some great conversations. And so I'll throw this out as a question.
Okay.
Because I remember when MLK was assassinated. I remember how fraught the society was at that time, and racism is taught. And I had really good parents who were open-minded, and they made it clear that it is, this is not cool. Racism is not cool. So I took it to heart to be, in a sense, not racially conscious. I tried to treat people just like people, and not based on externals, not based on differences or whatever. And now what I'm discovering is that I apologize for talking so much, but
No.
I'm setting the table here. I was of the belief that when Barack Obama was elected president, this country had finally turned the corner on race. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, if anything, and Trump comes along and gave permission to be racist. And so we are at a point, and of course, there's the George Floyd thing. I don't want to make a speech. I'm already making a speech. So, but my point is that we're now at a point where we are hyper conscious of race. And I have to lead writing workshops. And I've been trained, or at least some of the places where I work are very proactive about forcing me really to be conscious of race in a way where, if a white person, says something or writes something that is potentially offensive, I've got to be able to wade in there and diplomatically address it. And I'm still kind of learning my way through that. So all of this to say, and I forgive me for putting you on the spot to be the spokesman for all African Americans, because that's not fair, but help we white folks know how to be sensitive to an issue that has been plaguing this country since before it became a country.
Okay.
Um, how should we, as white people, navigate this?
Okay, this is wow.
Use both sides of the page if necessary.
This is a multifaceted issue,
Yeah.
and one of the worst things about it is that most people can't see that it's a multifaceted issue.
Multifaceted in what way?
Okay. Historically, when you and I were small, part of our indoctrination was that this country is a melting pot. Everybody comes here and we become Americans and we have this one big shared culture.
Right.
I was very comfortable in that universe. One big shared culture. I liked that. Now we live in a world where diversity is what we honor.
Yeah.
Which says to me, everybody needs to say different.
Right.
That guy in the grocery store who I can't understand what he's saying has no impetus to learn good English because this is my culture and why be diverse.
Well, I'm hearing you say that diversity is not necessarily all that it's cracked up to be.
In my opinion, diversity is a trap.
In what way? Because it traps you into whatever your bubble is?
Because people get indoctrinated to believe that they need to be the way they are, and it doesn't matter how that guy is. Now, you being a white guy, that's not what you're hearing. You're hearing you need to respect that guy's different and that guy's different and that guy's different and that guy's different. But all those guys that are different, what they're hearing is, I need to just be me and screw the rest of them guys. It's a trap. It's sticky because it sounds good. It feels good. That's one facet. Here's another. There is, in most people's minds, a white culture, a black culture, a Mexican culture, these different cultural groups. Inside each of those boxes is a bunch of boxes.
Right.
I learned firsthand that if you mess with somebody's box, they will never like you. I have friends. I have family.
Be specific.
I have family. I have family from Antigua, from the West Indies. I have some good friends from Jamaica. Don't screw up and refer to those guys as African Americans.
Right.
Because they don't see themselves that way.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And culture, which I think should be shared, people become possessive of it. And so now here's what I think is a contradiction, an internal contradiction. If you have a club and it's all white guys, someone will give you the side eye and say, hey, how come you're all white guys? Mm-hmm. If I'm in a club and I call it the Black Guys Club, that's okay. That's a contradiction.
It's a double standard, right?
If I come up with a new dance or new music or whatever, which black guys and gals are good at doing, and then white guys start doing it, or they're stealing our culture. That white guy who's wearing dreadlocks is stealing our culture. He's not stealing your culture. He's complimenting you. Right. He wants to be like you. So all of those conflicts, aside from everything else, all of those conflicts make for good storytelling.
And I mean, I read the Hannibal. I read Subtle Felonies, but you weren't. I didn't come away with a sense that, I mean, a white guy could have written it. I mean, obviously the culture,
I
that
think
we're talking about, but it was not overtly
the sub
race conscious. I
the
don't think.
sub theme of who is your posse?
Okay.
Okay, that's that's an important piece of the African American culture. I got
Okay.
my posse, my boys that follow me.
Mhm.
you know,
Well, but so Tony Soprano had his posse too.
yeah, yes, and it's not only the African American culture, but I think that the family members and maybe even the I started to say title character, but his name's not in the character in the title.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
missing man. Okay. He's where he is, and he always feels that I got something to prove. I'm rich and I have to act like that group. But he doesn't have that group to model. So the big fancy house and his wife who is worried sick about my husband who is missing, but I have guests, I have to feed them.
Mhm.
And I have to feed them fancy because that's how we do. So
Right.
there are little pieces in there. I don't know if I talked about it at all in this particular book, but Hannibal is actually mixed race. His mother was German. His father was a soldier who
Right.
married a German national,
Right.
and he was raised in that environment. So, and full disclosure, my son is the model here.
Uh-huh.
So I have him to go to and say, how do you react to this? What happens when this situation comes up?
Right.
And he has told me that, well, first, he has told me that there are a lot of situations where he's just quiet until he sees how things are going.
Wow. Yeah.
He has also told me that when he's with this group of friends, he talks like this. And when he's with that group of friends, he talks like that.
Wow.
And I've observed it. And he can flip that switch so quickly that sometimes it's scary.
Did you have to do the same kind of thing? I mean, it's, growing up, in a society that is, the majority, at least when we were growing up, the majority was white. And so how did you navigate that? I mean, did you ever get pulled over for driving while black?
Not until I was an adult.
I've never been pulled over for that.
Well,
I don't know what that's like, but I can imagine.
I was pulled over at night in North Carolina on I-85 by an officer who didn't want to say it, but what he really wanted to know was, what are you doing driving this Mercedes? And you say, good evening, officer. How can I help you? Was I speeding? Here's my license. Here's my registration. You keep your hands on the wheel. I have kind of a different viewpoint of that side of the universe than many of my brothers and sisters, because I write. Okay, I'm going to take 30 seconds to do a mental experiment here, but I think that when I'm writing, mysteries are all about human motivation.
Right.
I need to understand why people do what they do.
Right.
And I came to the conclusion that when that cop walks up to my car door and sees my face, he's not necessarily evil
Right.
or even angry. What he is scared. And what I need to do is put him at ease. He needs to be relaxed. I have a couple of advantages, having been through Dinfos, in that I have no accent. I don't sound like a guy who grew up in the hood.
Oh man.
So I can relax him. I see a lot of violence on TV between police, and especially right after George Floyd,
Right.
that was really generated by bad assumptions made on both sides.
Right.
I can't trust you. Well, when I was growing up, my parents made clear to me, you can't trust them guys.
Really?
They're all out to get you.
Woof. Then how were you able to get beyond that teaching?
I got beyond that by going to college. My parents wanted me to be the first person in my family to go to college. And when I went to college, I was surrounded by people who, because they didn't know any better, they treated me just like a person.
Mhm.
And I responded to that. And I was me and they were them, and we were cool.
And the military as well. The military
Yes.
was also a melting pot in many
When
ways, right?
the first time that I can't remember a name, but there was one drill I had who ended up becoming a sergeant major, I think. But I remember the first time he said, "We all bleed green." And I said, wow, I'm in this, this is my gang now.
Yeah.
Everybody has their gang. This is my gang. And
How
it's
long
not,
were you in the service?
I was in for 12. I
That's
didn't
a
go the
long time.
distance.
Did you consider being a lifer?
I did. I'll give you the 30-second. I was stationed here at AFRTS.
American Forces Radio and Television Service.
Yes. And I was doing TV news, and I came down for orders to Korea, which was a 2-year unaccompanied tour. Just before I got those orders, my then wife was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Mm.
I said, I'm not going to leave her alone. I heard, where you go and what you do depends on the needs of the service. You have no choice.
Right.
And I said, I do have a choice. I can seek employment elsewhere. So my time ran out, and the people who were running the shop I was in, I don't know if the name Nikki Wrestler means anything to you.
Mm.
The week before my term ended, they offered me a civilian job as a GS-11. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
And I walked out of the office one day in uniform, came back the next day in a jacket and tie.
Nice.
But,
and were you in DC then by this time?
Well, yeah, the office was in Fairfax, Virginia.
Right. DC area.
And I was doing radio in the Pentagon.
Uh-huh.
So that I could run into people's offices and do quick interviews and get sound bites and come in. And you remember those days where you rolled out the tape and you had a razor blade?
Oh, man. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That was fun.
I enjoyed it. It. It was, deadline work. And I was the voice of the home office, basically. And I had great fun in that job. But all of that time, there was never a black-white distinction.
Right.
Even when I was a DOD civilian, everything was very mushed together.
And what I'm hearing is that if I'm hearing you correctly, the best way to heal racial strife is to have vital and meaningful contact with as many different types of people as possible, so that we can see the similarities as opposed to get hung up on the differences.
That's kind of my view. You need to see all those ways that we're all the same. And for me, writing white characters is no more or less challenging than for you writing female characters.
Right.
You'll never be a woman, but you need to see those ways that we're all the same.
Right.
And those few little ways we're different. And
Okay. Well, then let's go back to writing for a second, because
okay,
there have been some of my clients and some of my students who are very astute and concerned about the racial divide that is America at the moment, to a certain extent. And so they are doing their best as writers to be empathetic. They are writing African American characters and other people of
sure.
other races. And yet, and I've counseled them, be careful if you're trying to get published and your protagonist is Black and you're not, because that's going to be an uphill fight. Am I right in that counsel?
I I think that you are correct. I think that that is a fact that is wrong. In my opinion, when people say to me, uh, the reason that the big publishers haven't come to you is because you're Black and you write about Black characters, and I always respond the same way. Wow, that must have been rough for James Patterson,
Right.
the guy who sells more than anybody made his name with a Black character. I don't think when they picked up that manuscript, they knew what he looked like. I don't think when they pick up my manuscript, they know what I look like.
Right.
That's an excuse. That's not a reason. But the publishing business is very sensitive to that kind of thing.
But let's talk about the publishing industry, because you have been a publisher, and you were with Intrigue Publishing,
Yes.
and talk about that. And then I want to segue to what you're involved with now, which is Odessin Books, which is a hybrid publisher. In fact, let's talk about hybrid publishing,
Okay.
because hybrid publishing has made it, I think, has made getting published much more accessible now.
Okay.
So go. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay. For a very, very long time, the options to get published have been get some big publisher to give you a pile of money, go with some small publisher and hope that they treat you good, or do it yourself.
Right.
Self-publishing is very attractive to a lot of authors. The downside is, for some of these things, there's a steep learning curve.
Right.
As a hybrid publisher, I am kind of the general contractor for getting your book out there.
What do you mean?
Okay. Nobody, I shouldn't use absolutes. It is the rare person who can develop all of the necessary skills to publish a book well.
Okay.
If you're a smart self-publisher, you hire somebody to format your book. You hire a proofreader to get the mistakes out. You hire a content editor, a developmental editor to make sure your story is right. You hire an artist to put a decent cover on your book. There are a lot of pieces, okay?
Right.
And then there's the whole process of what's an ISBN and how do I get in the Library of Congress and all. Well, instead of the author spending all of his time trying to become a publisher, the hybrid publisher says, write the book and let me do the grunt work.
Right.
I've got a proofreader on staff. I've got a developmental editor that I know is good if you want to work with them. I've got a person whose whole job is marketing that I can bring into this.
As a writer, though, can I pick and choose? Let's say that I've got the editing part covered. I'm a little weak in marketing, not so strong in formatting, but I don't need some of these services.
Well,
Is that possible?
Here I think is a primary difference between hybrid publishing and what I was doing before. When I was a small press, I was a capitalist. I was looking for that book that was going to make me enough money to support all these other writers that aren't making any money.
Mhm.
I'm a venture capitalist. Therefore, you sign over the rights and I do what I think is best. I do what I think is going to make me money. Now, the hybrid publisher, you are the customer. You are the client. So the decisions are yours. If I read your book and my advice to you is this plot has a couple of weak spots that you might want to work on, and you say, I'm putting up the money and I like it just as it is, well, then it's going to be just as it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel that your book is ready, but you don't know how to format it, well, we'll do that piece. Or okay, I have no idea how to pick out somebody to do a good cover. Well, I'll do that piece. We'll build a package that is appropriate for you. But all this time, you are getting our best advice and counsel. Up to you whether you take it, but you're getting our best advice and counsel. One of the long conversations I have with authors is, even if you hire a professional marketer, there's stuff you got to do.
Right.
Okay. You can't just fire this thing out in the universe, go sit in your chair and expect people to buy your book. How do I know this? Because I hang out with people who are very successful in this business. When you sit down and have lunch with Jeffrey Deaver, he will tell you that his year is divided into 3 pieces. I write for these months. We edit and proofread and refine for these months. And these 3 months, I'm on the road.
Yeah.
Why is he on the road? Because he knows that if he wants people to buy his books, he's got to go out and talk to people.
Well, then you've raised another interesting conversation point, and that is your literary conference, Creatures, Crimes, and Creativity, where Jeffrey Deaver was one of your high.
Keynotes.
Yeah, exactly. And he gave a class on writing thrillers. Very accessible guy, really interesting. And so, talk about literary conferences as well. I mean, you say you started going to conferences, early in the process.
Very early.
And that must have been overwhelming. I mean, it's
And
kind of scary to go to a
I
conference, isn't it?
it's hard to learn about conferences until you start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out that they're not all the same. First of all, there are conferences that are just for writers. You go there to learn and network a little bit. There are conferences for writers and fans like ours. And that's a very different experience. There are big conferences, and there are little conferences.
Yeah.
I really like, ours, obviously. I really like Killer Nashville is a good size.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they have agents there, so you can pitch.
Boucher Con is too big. Thriller Fest is not just too big. Thriller Fest is too
expensive.
Oriented.
It's
way too expensive. Yes,
right.
yes. But
it's good though. It's very good.
You can learn different things from these different experiences.
Right.
And one of the things I learned is there really is a writer's community. Usually broken up by genre. Right. And 90% of the people who are doing this for the right reason, which is I have to write. People used to ask me, why do you write? I said, well, because if I didn't, I'd die. Mm-hmm. It's like, why do you breathe? The people who are doing this for the right reason, 99% of them want to help you, want to help each other. We're different from most businesses in that respect.
Exactly.
So we went to this one in Chicago called Love is Murder. And it was the first one I went to that wasn't all one genre. They had mystery and suspense and thrillers and some sci-fi guys would sneak in. And I met Walter Mosley there. I met a number of serious people there. And I said, well, this is fun. It's too bad it's in Chicago in the middle of winter. I want this experience, but I want it over on the East Coast in the Mid-Atlantic.
Right.
So I said, how about franchising this and let me call it Love is Murder East? Well, they wouldn't go for that.
Yeah, nice try.
And as is this is the story of my life encapsulated. I said, this is something that I think I want to do. And my lovely wife and a couple of other friends said, well, what's stopping you? And I said, how hard can it be?
You found that out.
Well, I found out. But over the years, it grew, and people came to see it as an annual. This is where I got to be. After the first 3 or 4 years, it was like we couldn't stop if we wanted to. Somebody would firebomb my house. So,
let's hope not.
But I think that we have found a good space for ourselves in that we're just about 50% published authors to fans and avid readers. The fans really give a lot to the writers and vice versa.
Yeah, I describe it as a boutique conference.
And I appreciate that.
It's in Columbia, Maryland, not too far from DC. And it is, it's accessible. It's not overwhelming. You really don't get lost in the shuffle. And you attract some big names.
Well, that's the benefit of going to these other conferences. I learned that reaching out to anyone's publicist or publisher or agent to say we'd like them to come to our conference is largely a waste of time. But when you're sitting there in the room and you're having lunch with, well,
Jeffrey
Deaver, John Gilstrap, F. Paul Wilson, and you say, we do this conference and I would love for you to be my keynote speaker. And they say, keynote? Okay. Cool. That sounds like fun. Tell me more.
Exactly.
And we go way out of our way to make sure that those big names that come have a good time.
Yeah.
I have learned from listening that what they don't like about going to conferences, okay, I'm the keynote speaker, I get up and talk to a bunch of people, and then I got nothing to do. So the opposite of my original assumptions, what I've learned is, look, we're going to have you do a keynote. You can do a 1-hour thing of your own if you'd like, and we're going to put you on 2 or 3 panels with other writers so you can really share.
Yeah.
And we're all going to hang out in the bar after dinner.
Oh, that's where it happens.
And not everybody who hangs out in the bar after dinner is drinking.
No, exactly.
But they all go there because they want to just sit and have that exchange.
Exactly.
They want to talk.
That and that is exactly what happens there.
Yes.
And you and Denise do it really well. So I want to, before we wrap up, I want to talk just about the writing process for you. Obviously, there's the planners, there are the pantsers, the seat of the pantsers. What are you? How do you approach it?
Well, I describe myself as a plotter. I work from an outline.
Mm-hmm.
But as time has gone on, unlike Jeff Deaver, my outline has become shorter and shorter.
His gets bigger and bigger.
The outline for me is the series of events, the actual plot. This happens, then this happens, then this happens, dot. And I end up with 5 or 6 single-space pages, loosely broken into chapters.
Okay.
But there's not a lot of detail.
Right.
And as you know, the story is really driven by the characters. So here's this scene, and this is what I expect everybody to do in a very general way. But now I got to figure out, how do they get into that conversation? What does this space look like? And, so the details, the story I'm working on right now, I have a new character who is a professional assassin named Sky. And she meets with a gangster to talk about somebody that she's supposed to kill, and he drops dead. She didn't plan an escape because she didn't come here to kill somebody.
Exactly.
She takes off. She's seen by witnesses. She and her driver, in the outline, she and her driver are pulled over by police, and she is taken in for questioning. That's what the outline says. And he is left alone. But when it came time to write it, I sat down and I said, well, they're going to stop to eat. Where are they going to eat? Where are they? Google Maps. All right. They're going to swing over here and they're going to sit in Silver Diner, because that's the kind of place she likes. Sit in the Silver Diner. Okay. So how do the police end up getting her? Well, okay. Backtrack. They knew what car it was. How do they get her? 2 state troopers are going to walk into Silver Diner, and she's going to notice, boy, it got quiet in here. And look around, and they walk up to her. Now, none of this is in the outline, but they walk up to her. So I say, okay, I have to build this conversation. What's this conversation going to be like?
Well, and you do a good job with dialogue. I mean, I can tell that you do a good job of getting the characters talking to each other. And my hunch is that's pretty much how you move things along as you're writing.
Exactly. Because stuff happens based on what people say to one another and how they react to one another.
God, you and I have the same approach, sir.
That's because you're a great writer.
Wow, this is about you.
The same way.
This is about you, though. Thank you.
You're right. The dialogue for my books, the dialogue is key. I try to do a lot more showing than telling.
Right.
So dialogue is how people reveal themselves.
You could teach my classes. That's exactly what I try to get across.
If I was organized enough, maybe I could. I could sit in the back of the room and go, yep, he's right.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Right. Well, I'll bring you along next time.
So, troopers walk up, and then I had to think, has Sky ever been in this situation before? Well, no, she's a professional killer, but she's never dealt with police because she's never been caught. So she doesn't know what to do. And I'm a black woman in Southern Virginia with these 2 big white guys standing next to me. And one of them says, we'd like for you to come in to ask you a few questions. And she says, am I under arrest? Are you arresting me? And he says, do we have to? And she says, well, no. And because of who she is, then I got into her head and I got a chance to say, well, okay, these 2 guys are both within reach, 2 guns, 2 stun guns, 2 things of mace, this many steps to the door. I wouldn't have that big a problem getting out of this. But Mo's sitting here and I don't want him to see me do all that stuff. So I'll just go along.
Whoa. You're giving away your story here, man.
None of that is in the outline. So
this is what you're working on now, right?
There's a certain amount of pantser in me.
Yeah.
The outline is here's what happened. But when you get down to how and why, that happens in the moment. And it's fun.
How much rewriting do you do?
First of all, I write from the beginning to the end. Don't stop.
That's my advice.
I go back to the beginning and I go through looking for plot holes or what I call character divergence. If I'm reading on, I say, that character wouldn't do this. That's out of character.
Why is it that you go all the way through to the end? What's your motive? What's your thinking about that?
In my head, it's a movie. Nothing has happened until I write it. But once I write it, that happened. That's done. I can't go back and change that. That's what they did.
Right.
So forward motion, momentum.
Right. You just have to live with what you've got.
Gun to the end. Exactly. Gun to the end. Then when I go back and I look at things in a different light, here's where the rewrite comes in. And part of it is, honestly, I am a little too full speed ahead. I want to get there.
Sure.
So I get to a scene, I say, wow, I didn't describe anything in this scene.
Right.
So I need to show them what the room looks like and where people are sitting and all that stuff.
I get the impression that you're not afraid of making mistakes.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Because writer's block, fear is at the base of writer's block.
And I guess that's why I never have writer's block, because the story is going to be what I make the story to be. And because I have the outline, I know what the story is. Okay, I got that scene written, move to the next scene.
And if you do make a mistake, or if it's not perfect, you go back and shore it up.
I can go back and fix that. Sure. Right. And we all make mistakes in the process.
How long does the process take for you from idea to the end?
From first idea, from the first outline, which is like 2 sentences, and then it grows and grows and grows until I think I've got a book's worth. It's just about a year.
Okay.
Just about a year.
And how long does the rewrite process take?
I might spend the actual, what I think of as rewrite, might be a month. But then I go back again separately to debug the bad grammar and that spelling error that I overlooked.
That's macro to micro.
Yes.
What about beta readers? When do you bring them in?
When I'm done, when I think I can't make this any better,
right?
Then I let somebody else tell me how I can make it better.
And how do you find these beta readers?
Well, early on, that was a challenge. Now it's pretty easy. There are people out there who already like my stuff, and I send off to them. And I belong to a critique group, the Royal Writers.
Yes. Oh, good group.
Yes.
Rick Pullen.
Rick Pullen, that's right. And I belong to that group. And this is like the 4th critique group that I've tried to be in. This is the one I'll stay in, because what I was looking for was people who write better than I do.
Yeah, and there's some fabulous writers in there. Jeff,
when you're in a critique group and you're the best writer in the room, you're not getting much. You're helping, but you're not.
And it took a while to find, because you're at writers' conferences, you run a writers' conference, so the more in the mix you are and having vital conversations with people, the more you find.
As a matter of fact, it was standing in Thriller Fest. That Rick Pullen said to me, "You live near you should be in our critique group." Nice. That's how it happens. It's all networking.
It really is.
But yeah, I do the nitnoid stuff. Then I shop it out to my friends, and then I consider what of their advice I want to take and what of their advice I don't. And there's always the polish. You got to polish every word. The thing that too many starting writers don't get is that every word matters.
Yeah, but you don't have to sweat that at the very beginning, because the story is really important.
You're at the
buffing and polishing.
The very last step in the process is when you're deciding, was he happy or was he glad?
Ooh, yeah, exactly. Look, before we go, I want to go back to your Army days because you were in Desert Storm. Talk
Yeah.
about the time with the Patriot missile crews and the Scuds.
Oh boy.
I
Well,
don't know this story, but it's got to be interesting.
okay. Um, you remember what it was like when
I was at CNN during that time.
the balloon goes up. Every single person in uniform wants to be out there, and they sent an initial gang out to do radio in the desert.
Yeah.
Some of my good buds at the time, and we could hear what they were doing, and they did it right. The very first song they played out there in that truck they were broadcasting from
Mhm.
was "Rock the Casbah."
Ha
But anyway,
That's appropriate. But
so
when
I
I was
here
in
I
the
am.
Army, it was Fortunate Son.
Here I am back in Belgium, and they come around. They say they want somebody to do video, and they want them. I said, great. They said, but not up front. They want them in Israel because at that time, DoD wanted the Patriot missile crews to be stars. We want to promote them. I said, well, cool. That's easy. Me and my buddy grabbed our cameras, packed up, got on a nice Israeli jet and zoomed over there because they were protecting Israel from the Scud missiles, which were not very accurate, but they did a lot of damage.
Let me
And
just interject because at CNN we had people all over the Middle East, and the
right,
danger was that we would become Saddam Hussein's forward observers because we were able to tell where the missiles landed, so
yeah,
that they could then make their aim better. So
right.
basically, the Israeli government says, "Don't do that, or we're going to kick you out of the control room." Back to you.
So there we are, and the Army does have its own gangs within the gang. And if you're one of those guys who thinks of yourself as a grunt, as a gun bunny, generally speaking, you don't have a whole lot of respect for those rear guys like journalists. Okay. What do you do? Yeah, you make TV. What the?
Yeah.
But, we got a cot. We got in tent with them guys. We got our gun. And we're shooting video of life out in the woods, basically, or life out in the desert, basically. And we were out there for 2 weeks, and we produced 2 packages a day. But the fun was the first time that alarm went off, and they said, "Okay, incoming Scud."
Incoming.
Well, to me, okay, this is the money shot.
There you go.
Grab the camera, run outside, and there's an odd phenomenon that happens to you when you're looking in the viewfinder. Some part of your brain thinks you're just watching TV.
TV, right.
So, and I'm watching the Scuds come in, and my buddy's shooting, we took turns. My buddy's shooting the missile. The missile takes off, and I see blam, and I see blam and blam. And they shot every one of it. And I'm saying, wow, this is great footage.
Right.
After the fact, when the adrenaline wears off, you say, people were shooting missiles at me. at me. I mean, if one of those missiles had gotten through, I would have been, my last thought would have been, wow, this is great footage. That missile's coming right at the camera.
Right. Oh my God.
But it was
Have you,
beyond exciting. We also got to go into Tel Aviv and do some, this is Israeli life, ride on the bus with people who were men and women who were getting on the bus carrying their rifles.
Jeez. Did you end up writing about this? Has any of this seeped into your writing?
Actually, no.
Well, why not?
That's a very good question, and the best answer I can give you is I don't know if I wanted to go back there. I
You
mean,
can't force it. It can't be forced.
what I write is fiction, and I set all of my fiction in real places, and it's all today. But I don't know, war is its own thing,
And that's not what you write.
and that's not what I write.
Okay.
I mean, I write a series that involves a retired mercenary soldier, but not at war.
Right.
War is a different when you're sitting on the roof with the missile guys. There's a lot of boring.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. It is this placid, calm blue sea interrupted once in a while by total terror and complete panic. But it's not what I want to write.
Well, look, people, this is your website, ascamacho.com, and that's how people can get in touch with you.
Yes, there's a link there. You can click through and send me whatever evil message you want to send. You can
And
also see all my books.
Will they learn? Yeah, they'll learn about your books, and will they learn about the Creatures, Crimes, and Creativity Conference and your publishing house?
There are links to
Okay.
both of those both have separate websites. If you want to go straight to learning all about the conference, you type in c3con.org,
Uh-huh.
and that'll get you right to that.
Okay.
And Odessin Books is that website,
Okay.
but there are links on my site as well.
What you mentioned what you're working on. So you've got another Hannibal Jones that you're working on?
I have started a whole new series that is currently looking for a home.
Oh.
As I already said, I have to write. I can't not write.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a short story about this character, and she kept asking me, why don't I tell her whole story? So I wrote a novel, and by the time of the end of that one, I wrote a second novel, and then a third. There are 3 novels about this character unpublished.
When do you do your writing? Is there do you have a certain time and place?
I do best in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an odd fact that other writers have confirmed for me. When I was working full time, I had to write in my spare minutes whenever I could. Now I'm retired. I have the whole day.
Right.
My production has not improved.
Right.
It has not increased. I write the same amount. I can grind and I can hit it for an hour and then go wander off and come back and hit it for an hour. But the other dirty little secret that most authors don't want to admit, a lot of my writing time is staring into space. That scene that I told you that I wrote in the Silver Diner was preceded by maybe 45 minutes just sitting there going, okay, well, how's that going to work? What's that going to look like? Okay, they walk in. Where are they sitting? Okay, what are they going to order? What does she like to eat? What does he like to eat? What are they talking about?
Yeah, and it's just questions. It's just questions. You have to have a lot of curiosity as a writer.
And once you know, and you have to want to know those people.
Would you say that your training as a military broadcaster and journalist helped refine your approach to writing fiction?
Absolutely.
What way? In what way?
Well, in a couple of ways. First of all, the first thing you learn as a professional journalist or broadcaster is you can't sit around waiting for your muse to come sit on your shoulder.
That's right.
You have to sit down and write. Park yourself, and if nothing's there, then park yourself in front of that blank screen until something says, type me. I also learned that brief is better in general. I learned the difference between passive voice and active voice.
Right.
which a lot of writers still don't have.
Oh, I still make that mistake a lot.
I learned as a government employee why passive voice is so popular.
Oh, it's because you can obfuscate.
There it is. If I write mistakes were made, I don't have to tell you who made them.
There you go. There you go.
But when I'm writing fiction, I have to tell you who did what, and where they were and why and how. And I also learned that you need to, how can I say this? You need to flesh it out to a certain extent. I can't just give you the skeleton.
Right.
And that's what I learned as a journalist. I can't just tell you, here's what happened. I have to give it context.
Right.
Real life scenes all have context. When yesterday, a police captain was shot in his car. He drove to the police station and went inside so they would get him to a hospital. That was the first report. I needed context. Was he shot because he was a police captain, or was he shot because somebody got wacky and got unlucky? They stopped their car, got out of the car, and took a shot at him. Okay, that's context. Why was he there? He was following them because somebody was driving erratically, and even though he was off duty and out of uniform, it was in his blood. Somebody's driving erratically. Let me see what's going on. That's what you have to do with your fiction. You have to have context, not just, the outline probably said he was shot in his car and he drove to the police station.
Right. There's more to the story.
Exactly.
Look, we've covered a lot of ground.
Which is your whole career, by the way.
Oh, this is true.
You don't talk about yourself enough, but your whole career is there's more to the story.
Well, yes, this is true. I do. I
talk
about myself. Be that as it may.
Yeah. Okay.
So look, you and I can go on and on and on, and I'm sure we will, because I'll be seeing you on the circuit. But is there anything I didn't ask that you'd like to have a crack at?
Wow, I think you covered it. I think you covered it pretty darn well.
We did cover a lot of ground.
I hope we can leave people with the idea that they might want to pick up one of my novels. I hope we can leave people with the idea that whether you're a writer, an aspiring writer, or just a big fan, the Creatures, Crimes, and Creativity Conference is the place to be in September, 13th, 14th, and 15th, if I remember correctly.
Unfortunately, I'm going to be in Greece then, but
yes,
that was just because that's when we could get everybody in the family together. Otherwise, I'd be there.
That's all right. There's next year.
There is next year, and I definitely intend to be back. Austin, this is so much fun talking to you. I'm John DeDakis. You've been one-to-one with me, and I've been one-to-one with Austin Camacho, who's a novelist. He is a publisher, and he runs a boutique writers conference in Columbia, Maryland. Austin, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great.